The truth. Getting to what we can all accept is a valid explanation of the world around us is, as you may have noticed, very tricky. This is especially true for psychology. Most psychologists think the scientific method is the best mechanism to get to the truth of reality. And they have a solution. Construct a theory and then test that theory by altering one variable with many, many participants. So, an experiment. And this is what's known as a nomothetic approach. But when we think about the things psychologists study, we need to question if this actually gets us to the truth of human experience. Every person with schizophrenia experiences this complex mental illness differently, and has had very different life events leading up to the disorder. The same is true with every couple who gets divorced, and every individual who commits a murder. Perhaps a more valid, so a more true understanding of why these individuals behave the way they do, is to take an idiographic approach, carefully studying all aspects of their unique experience using a case study. The PsychBoost flashcard app has a new feature. Test yourself with over 1,500 multiple choice questions, including every topic on A-level and GCSE psychology. Try Paper 1 for free right now. And Patreon supporters can watch PsychBoost videos ad-free, learn from over 17 hours of exclusive exam tutorial videos, and access hundreds of digital and printable resources, including mind maps, quiz sheets, worksheets, teaching slides, and more. Idiographic and nomothetic approaches to psychological investigation. Idiographic and nomothetic are two pretty weird-sounding words. But as often the case, knowing the origin of words, their etymology, helps us understand and, importantly, remember them. Both idiographic and nomothetic have their origins in ancient Greek. Nomos is an ancient Greek word meaning law. So, for psychologists, nomothetic research attempts to establish general laws of behaviour that apply to all of us. Idio comes from the ancient Greek word for individual. In psychology, we say research is idiographic when it focuses on the experience of the individual, exploring their unique understanding of the world in depth. Keep this basic difference in mind. Idiographic is focused on the individual, and nomothetic is about making general laws that apply to entire populations. And you're most of the way there. But by the end of this video, I want you to be able to fully define and compare nomothetic and idiographic approaches, understand their relative strengths and weaknesses, and link to examples of when each type has been used in psychology. So let's start with nomothetic. Most of the research you'll come across in your A-level psychology course takes a nomothetic approach. Researchers study a large sample of participants and then use those findings to generate new laws of behaviour or support an existing theory. To take a nomothetic approach, then, is to make inferences about the wider population based on the behaviour of a sample. This process of generalisation allows researchers to make laws of behaviour that apply to all of us, like categorising people into groups and placing people on scales. Using a nomothetic approach, researchers can make predictions about future behaviour. The main research method used by nomothetic researchers is the carefully controlled experiment, but they can also use structured observations. These experiments and observations produce quantitative data. Now, I'm going to assume that you know quantitative data is numerical data. If not, you might want to check out my video in the Research Methods unit. If you remember the strengths and weaknesses of quantitative and qualitative data, you can probably guess the evaluations we're going to use in this video. Nomothetic research is seen as a scientific approach. The large samples mean generalizations are made from the data. These studies tend to have high reliability. If you conduct the study again, you'll get similar results. But we could make the point that this focus on reliability comes at the expense of validity. But I'll save that point for the evaluations. The approaches that primarily use nomothetic methods are behaviorism, social learning theory, biological psychology, and cognitive psychology. If you think about these topics, you can probably think of examples of nomothetic studies: Skinner's rats, Pandora's Bobo doll, biological drug trials, and memory experiments that tested the components of the multi-store model. Idiographic. So in contrast, we would say idiographic research focuses on an individual's subjective experiences, behaviours, and personalities. Context is also important, so the researchers should also consider the cultural, social, and environmental factors that influence behaviour. In idiographic work, as each individual and their experience is assumed to be unique, idiographic research doesn't usually attempt to generalise findings or claim to have found laws of behaviour. The case study is the classic non-experimental technique used by an idiographic researcher, but any method that produces rich, in-depth information could be used. So perhaps a content analysis of a set of diaries or unstructured interviews. This type of research will generally produce qualitative data, data in the form of words. Idiographic research is seen as unscientific. One of the main reasons is that idiographic data is unreliable. If we repeat a case study, the results will always be different. For example, if a researcher conducted 2 unstructured interviews on people with depression, personal experiences, beliefs about the illness, and precise symptoms are going to be different. This data is arguably more valid, so truthful in its description of depression, but it's not a method that can be used to demonstrate cause and effect relationships. The only approach that's truly idiographic is the humanistic approach. They use case studies to explore each individual's unique experience without attempting to generalize. Psychodynamics also relies on case studies such as Anna O and Little Hands, but Freud also used these case studies to argue for general laws of behavior, like the psychosexual stages of development and the Oedipus complex. This is one of the reasons psychodynamics is not viewed as a scientific approach to psychology. So you can see here an outline of both idiographic and nomothetic approaches to psychological investigation. You've likely noticed so far I've given a series of direct comparisons in case you're asked to compare. In the exam, you might be asked to talk about idiographic and nomothetic methods in the context of other parts of the course. You could use the approaches, but I want to show you some more detailed examples. Examples of the nomothetic approach. In psychopathology, and if you study schizophrenia as an option, you will have covered drug treatments, including SSRIs for OCD and chlorpromazine for schizophrenia. The reason drug treatments are widely used is biological psychologists have conducted large-scale and well-controlled drug trials to test the efficacy of novel drug treatments. In short, nomothetic drug trials show the drugs work, as intended, on most people, most of the time. The reliability of the findings across repeated trials has given doctors treating mental health conditions the confidence to prescribe those drugs to their patients. So, taking a nomothetic approach has ultimately helped millions of people access treatments that reduce symptoms. The behaviorists Skinner and Pavlov used nomothetic methods to test their theories of operant and classical conditioning. As they were highly controlled experiments, they could be replicated, and the initial findings have been supported by thousands of similar studies on rats, pigeons, and dogs in the years since. Not only have these behavioral principles been used to predict animal and human behavior accurately, but they've also led to practical applications like systematic desensitization therapies. Behaviorists were among the first psychologists to use controlled and reliable nomothetic techniques, and this approach to research has given modern psychology scientific legitimacy. Examples of the idiographic approach. We really do need to use humanistic psychology as an example if we're going to apply the idiographic approach, as humanistic psychologists are the only ones to argue that, due to the subjective and highly complex psychological aspects of human experience, humans are not suitable for scientific study in the same way as physical objects. The humanists Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow preferred to investigate the uniqueness of human experience instead of developing generalizable behavioral laws. We can also point to a practical application, client-centered therapy, a technique that takes a highly individualized approach to treatment that's missing from treatments based on nomothetic principles like drug therapy. The use of case studies as an idiographic technique is not limited to humanism. It's been used in a number of psychological fields. Cognitive psychologists have been informed by the experience of people like Clive Waring, a man with severe amnesia. Case studies like TAN have helped biological psychologists researching the localization of function. And of course, as I've mentioned, the theories Freud developed came from his investigation of cases like Little Hands. These in-depth investigations provide insights into the structure of mental processes like memory and brain function that wouldn't be possible experimentally. These insights are used to inform existing theoretical models, support or contradict previous theories, and construct testable hypotheses that can then be tested experimentally. Idiographic and nomothetic approaches to psychological investigation. Evaluations. As nomothetic and idiographic methods are opposite in their approach to studying human behavior, the evaluations reflect each other, so the strengths of one tends to be the weakness of the other. This should make the evaluations fairly easy to remember. When it comes to nomothetic, one advantage is researchers are able to make generalizations. This is because they take a scientific approach with replicable studies, high levels of control, and data that can be assessed for significance with statistics. We could also argue that the use of standardized methods reduces the likelihood of bias, both in the collection and interpretation of data. However, nomothetic methods cannot fully represent human behavior. Making statements about what it means for someone to have a mental health disorder, gender identity, or to have committed a violent crime could never represent everyone in that group. We could also argue that the data collection techniques used by nomothetic researchers are superficial. reducing emotions to points on a scale, ticking yes or no boxes for major life events, or measuring levels of neurotransmitters in some other mental health condition. It produces reliable data, but at the expense of validity, as the data collected is overly reductionist. Idiographic. When it comes to idiographic research, the data collected isn't superficial, it's rich. Because participants can fully explain their experience, the level of detail collected is more varied and extensive, giving idiographic research a more valid perspective on human behavior. It's true, a single case study shouldn't be used to create general laws of behavior. But interesting case studies can be used to generate new areas of nomothetic investigation, or case studies can be used to confirm or even overturn established theories. However, the nature of idiographic studies, with the researcher potentially spending months or even longer investigating the case with hours of interviews to transcribe, means that compared to nomothetic research, idiographic research can be far more time-consuming. The nature of spending a significant amount of time with the subject of a case means the researcher's interpretation of the data could be affected, resulting in bias. We can finish by talking about taking an integrative approach. Idiographic and nomothetic research have separate strengths, and if used together, they complement each other. There are two options. Firstly, using the nomothetic approach. General trends in the wider population can be identified, followed by an idiographic study exploring the trend in individuals. Alternatively, idiographic findings can generate hypotheses, tested on the larger scale using nomothetic methods, such as Tan's limited ability with language production is now backed up by nomothetic fMRI brain scanning research confirming the role of Broca's area in language production. We could argue that this integrative approach leads to a more holistic understanding than either method alone. I want to thank everyone over on Patreon for supporting the channel. Because of you, I've been able to teach part-time, meaning I can make PsychBoost on YouTube for everyone. I do have extra resources that are exclusive for my patrons, so if you've decided to sign up, you can grab those over on my website. And these include over 100 exam question tutorial videos, of course including questions on the Issues and Debates unit. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next PsychBoost video.